afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Fenway Park, and thank you for joining us. Last night, the Red Sox announced the hiring of Dave Dombrowski as president of baseball operations. And seated to my left at the table, we have Red Sox principal owner John Henry, chairman Tom Werner, Dave Dombrowski, and chief operating officer and incoming president Sam Kennedy. Before we take questions, John would like to open with some remarks, which will be followed by Dave, and then we can go to questions. John?
Thank you. This is a great day for the future of the Red Sox. It is a tribute to our city and great fans that Dave is elected to join us as president of baseball operations. I thought a personal reflection was appropriate. In 1998, I made the decision to buy the Florida Marlins after their general manager had been forced to disperse the players of a world champion 8 games that year. They were facing a daunting rebuilding process. I sat down with the general manager, Dave Dombrowski, because whether or not I was going to move forward was dependent on one decision. Would Dave remain the general manager? I was convinced that the man who had built great teams in Montreal and had taken an expansion franchise from creation to a world championship would, if supported, rebuild another championship team. A few days after that purchase, after it went through, Dave and I were walking along the street in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and he was asking me what I knew about minor league third baseman for the Yankees, since I was a partner in the Yankees. His first trade under my ownership was acquiring Mike Lowell for 3 starting pitchers who ended up starting a total of 6 games in the majors. Mike made almost 1,500 starts. With that, Dave began an ambitious build for a championship. A few months later, he signed a 16-year-old Miguel Cabrera, a high school pitcher named Josh Beckett, and then a high school first baseman named Adrian Gonzalez about a year later. When it became clear after 3 years that I was in for a very long political siege in trying to get a ballpark built in South Florida, I decided to sell the Marlins. I said to Dave that throughout your career, you've never had the resources to build and keep great teams except for 1 year. I don't know who is going to own this club. So if you can go somewhere where you'll have a chance to have better resources, you should do so. Dave found a great home in Detroit as president and general manager. I was lucky enough to land here, and the Marlins won the championship in 2003, a combination of Dave's base building and very smart moves on the part of new ownership. And then many of our Marlins ended up here: Josh Beckett, Mike Lowell, Kevin Millar, to name a few. Over this summer, there's been much discussion about strengthening baseball organization internally. On August 4th, when the Tigers announced a shakeup with Dave leaving, I spoke to Tom and Ben about having a conversation with Dave. Tom and I wanted to see if there was a fit for Dave within the Red Sox organization. Ben did not object. Would our philosophies coincide in the present day? Tom, Mike Gordon, and I subsequently met with Dave on August 13th at Chicago's owner meeting and had a long discussion about the future, about baseball philosophy and whether or not there was a fit. We all left there thinking we could substantially strengthen the organization with Dave as president of baseball. We realized that our baseball views were in fact going to be in sync, that Dave intends to balance scouting, data analytics, player makeup, and all the tools in his toolbox. We hoped that Ben Cherington would remain as general manager, but we knew there was a substantial risk he would not. This was our decision to make. Tom and I have an obligation to do everything we possibly can for this to win for this city of Boston and Red Sox fans everywhere. As owners, we're ultimately responsible for the poor results we've had over the last 2 years and for results going forward. Dave Dombrowski is not just a baseball man. He has always been a force in his community as a family man. Today we welcome to Boston not just Dave, but his wife, Carrie, his daughter, their daughter, Darby, and their son, Landon. They are now an integral part of the Boston Red Sox. Today is about the future of the Boston Red Sox. We have a history of success over the past 14 years, characterized by a certain boldness and purpose. That's very much alive here today. Dave Dombrowski is an architect of team building the right way for almost 3 decades now. He's earned the respect of everyone in the game, and we feel sure that this city will embrace him and his family. He has a very strong organization supporting him. Please welcome Dave Dombrowski.
Thank you, John. Thanks to people that come out here today, the front office and the media. For me, there'll be a lot of questions after this. It's an extreme honor to join the Red Sox organization, one of the most prestigious organizations in baseball and in professional sports. You look what the organization brings. First and foremost, a thanks to John and to Tom for bringing me here, having the opportunity to work here and work with them and trying to build a world championship club. You look at the fan support that is here, full house all the time. You're in a spot where you have a great front office with what they've done from a business perspective, and probably when you look the most forward-thinking business operation in professional sports. Right here, Sam, I'm looking forward to working with Sam, and I know he's worked under the tutelage of Larry for years and been trained for this. You look at the ball club, it's a situation where there's a lot of great young talent breaking in at the major league level at this time. The minor league system has a lot of talent also. So when you start looking at opportunities that come around, there aren't very many opportunities like this that exist. So I could have waited, but to me there made no sense in waiting. It's a great opportunity to start. When we met in Chicago with John and Tom, and Mike Gordon was there too, we were in a spot, they basically asked me, well, when do you think, if you were to be offered the job, when would be the most opportune time to start? And I basically said probably the sooner the better, because it gives you a pulse of what's taking place the rest of the year and you can move forward from there. So it's a great opportunity. My wife Carrie, my daughter Darby, my son Landon, we look forward to being part of the community and being here for years to come and bringing together a great organization, great baseball, a lot of enthusiasm. I know everything will be great until we lose a ball game, but it's also a situation where we look forward to really building upon what's been built here and continuing to grow the organization to be in a world championship caliber club on the field. So I appreciate it, and thanks everybody for coming out.
Okay, thank you, John and Dave. If you have a question, please raise your hand. There are microphones on either side, as well as one in the middle aisle. Before asking your question, please state your name and media affiliation. And we can begin over here with Johnny Miller on the right.
Yes, Johnny Miller, WBZ News Radio 1030. David, how are you going to go about rebuilding the pitching staff?
Well, I guess we need to find some better pitching, is what it comes down to. I think it's, for me, starting off, I think the first thing, and once the conversations started, I've had a chance to watch some games on TV. Of course, we've played the Red Sox some too. There's some foundation of guys, but that'll be a focus for the club. How we go about it will still have to be determined.
Of the Red Sox, or a desire to change the leadership?
Well, I think too much has been made about perhaps a sea change. After all, our focus has always been about winning. We have used data as a part of our toolbox, but in the end, it's all about player evaluation and data and character. And I think we're all united that we're giving Dave the responsibility of fielding a championship ball club, and I'm sure he'll speak to his philosophy, but we've talked about it, and we think that there's a lot more in common than perhaps has been suggested.
Okay, Pete? Here.
Dave, Peter Abraham from the Boston Globe. This is a new model for the Sox, a new structure. Do you see yourself hiring a GM, and I guess what would his responsibilities be, and do you see any internal candidates with this team now?
Well, originally, I was hopeful that Ben would stay. I talked to Ben yesterday, and that was part of the thought process. I understand why he came to the decision that he did, but I have an utmost respect for him, and he's left a lot of good parts to the organization, and he's going to help with the transition here. But I do plan on hiring a general manager. I think the job is a very large job as far as responsibilities are concerned. There's a lot of work to be done. The Red Sox, in addition to the things I talked about, they pursue talent all over the world. So I think that having a front office that's large, that works together on the same page, will be important. I really don't have a specific, this is a leading candidate for a general manager at this time. They will assist and work with me day in and day out on basically everything. So it'll be a responsibility that we will share. I talked to a couple of the guys in the front office today. I don't know the front office people real well here at this point, more just in stopping through and visiting with, when we go to meetings. We will get to know each other a lot more over the next time period, but I think one thing that's important that makes an organization good, and baseball operations, which is my responsibility, is that you're going to have disagreements about responsibilities, and you're going to have disagreement about players and trades, and it's very important that they're expressed. And we've always done that in the past, and we'll continue to do that here. But I'll take some time. I'm not going to rush into that type of decision, and make sure that we make the appropriate decision at the time.
Okay, Steve?
Steve Buckley, Boston Herald. Tom and John, Mr. Dombrowski was just saying that there were discussions with Ben yesterday afternoon about Ben staying on, and the team made an announcement in the late stages of last night's game. I was wondering if you two could outline what happened during those 6 hours, and if there were discussions with Ben about staying and how that all played out from your perspective.
Well, we were, as John said, we were hopeful that Ben would stay. And I know he had at least a couple of conversations with Dave yesterday. And Ben met with us a couple of times, and then he elected to serve the Red Sox, and that's really something that we all agree on, what's in the best interest of the Red Sox. He believes that it is best for the organization if he steps aside. He is going to be with us during this transition and work with Dave. And I just want to say, John and I were disappointed in his decision, but respect it. And we think the world of Ben. He was, as we've said, the chief architect of our success in 2013, and he's built a strong nucleus going forward. And he's been with the organization for 18 years, and we are disappointed but respectful of his decision.
I think to add to that, just when I was hired and talked, it was a situation where they basically, John and Tom had asked me about my thoughts with Ben, and I said I'd love to have Ben if he would want to remain. But I think it's important in the transition to know that if me coming in the president of operations, of baseball operations, that the final decisions when it comes to trades or player or the personnel aspects that would need to fall into my hands. Now, of course, you're not going to be in a position that you go out and you sign a free agent player for large dollars. We will work very closely together on those things, and that will remain a collective decision. But as far as the day-to-day decisions in that regard, and I had hoped Ben would stay because I've known Ben for a long time, and I have a respect for him. But they left that decision up to me. I really felt that way. They both thought very highly of him, would love to have had him on board. But ultimately, he felt that it was in his best interest, the best interest of the Red Sox and everybody that's involved to move on. But I have a tremendous professional respect for him.
Okay, Nick, in the middle.
Dave, hi. A lot of your trusted staff is in Detroit, many of whom have received promotions since you left. Is there anything in this agreement that prohibits you from pursuing someone from that staff?
No, I mean, they would fall into any type of situation like anyone else, and then I wouldn't want to get into tampering on anybody that works for any organization, but if you're under contract for somebody, you're committed to them. I think it's important to know, and again, talking to a couple of people in the front office very quickly in the baseball end of it, is that I'm not here to blow up the operation. I mean, I know there's a lot of good people here. They have good reputations. When I originally went to Detroit, we kept, I think, everybody there at a time and evaluated them over a time period. And so it's a situation where I look to hopefully enhance what we have, work together closely, and then if we can add people from the organization, from wherever it may be, we're open-minded to that. But I hope that most of the people here will be in a position to stay and be able to help.
Gordon on the left.
Gordon Eads, ESPN. My question's for Dave. Dave, Tom alluded to the fact that maybe too much has been made of this sea change that you're coming on board in terms of a change in philosophy. How much reliance do you put on analytics, and what role do you feel it does play in your decision-making process?
Well, it's a great question, because I think we're in a spot in today's world where we're basically termed you're analytical or you're non-analytical. And I don't really agree with that at all. I think the reality is that you use all the information you possibly can to come to the best decision that you can. So we don't have or did not have as big an analytical department as some other organizations do for various reasons. But I did have people in our office that would give you any analytics that you wanted to get. And we would be up to date on any type of thing that you could get. There was a couple gentlemen in our office that could walk in any time, and I asked for a lot of information. But I think when you're in my spot, what you do is you combine all of this. You combine statistical information, your scouts' opinions, your own instincts on players. You find about makeup of players, their work ethic, and you make the best decision you possibly can. And that's how we'll proceed. And if there's some edge that we can get from a statistical perspective, then we should use it. It's also one, and it falls into the on-field aspect of it, but our manager in Detroit was Brad Ausmus, and Brad, I didn't know until we hired him. And I remember at the time, I said, Brad, anything you want, we'll give you. You tell us what you want, we'll give it. And we'll do the same thing for John and Tori here and continue to make us the best club we possibly can to win on a daily basis.
Scott?
Dave, Scott Lauber with the Boston Herald. And since you just brought up John's name, I know he's dealing obviously with health concerns this week and in the weeks going forward, but have you had the opportunity to talk to him yet? And what's the message that you delivered to him in terms of his future should his health allow him to continue in this job?
Well, I talked to John last night. We played phone tag a little bit, and we finally caught up later in the evening, and we talked for a while. I think the first and foremost with John, and I don't know John real well. I mean, we've crossed paths. We know each other a little bit, but I wouldn't say that we know each other real well. I told him first and foremost, you need to take care of your health, and that's the most important thing. And he's a very respected individual in the game. But I don't even think at this point, as I told him, I said, you take care of you. Take care of yourself. When you have an opportunity to visit in person, you call me and let me know, and we'll work out getting together. He thought he would be able to visit by the end of this homestand, so we'll sit down and visit. But just really to get to each other, get to know each other even better, and get his feeling on the ball club.
Okay, Bill on the right.
Yeah, can I ask one and one? Would that be okay? John, how are you? Bill Blue from the Worcester Telegram. If Dave had not become available, would you have created this position and hired somebody else?
It's something that we would have discussed probably at the end of the year when there were candidates available. It's something that we would have discussed, but when Dave became available, that was the first thought, that perhaps he could serve in that role if there was a fit philosophically.
And Dave, as a competitor, a competing general manager with the Tigers, do you have any sense of why a team with this payroll and level of talent has finished last, going on 2 years in a row now?
Well, I really don't. I think that you come in here and you need to really see it more from an observation perspective day in and day out. So I really don't have that total pulse. And I know there's been a couple of players who have been injured. They haven't pitched real well this year at times. But I can't really tell you without coming in here and having a chance to observe on a daily basis.
Okay, Sean on the left.
Sean McAdam, Comcast Sportsnet New England. Two, if I may, one for John. John, as recently as June 2nd, you said you expected Ben Cherington to be the general manager here, quote, for a very long time. Yet in bringing Dave in and giving him the title and power that you have, and acknowledging, as you already did, that there was a risk, a substantial risk, that Ben wouldn't stay, what changed in the last 2.5 months regarding your opinion of Ben's performance?
Well, a couple of things. One is that Dave became a free agent, and so we wanted to see if there was a fit. At the beginning, I did not believe that we would necessarily lose Ben as a result of this if we were successful bringing Dave aboard. But our job is to make Tom's job, my job, is do everything we can to strengthen baseball, the baseball side of things. And there just was, as we talked with Dave, became apparent to all three of us, Tom, Mike, and I, that this would really strengthen us going forward. So at that point, again, we knew there was a risk that, a substantial risk that Ben would leave, but we felt this was in the best interest of the organization.
And Dave, if I may, if you could just maybe talk about your philosophy of team building, the things that you value. Some GMs or executives like power pitching, some like power. If you could just maybe address that.
Well, I can give you a general, but everybody would probably say the same thing. So, I mean, and then I think one of the keys for you as a successful baseball executive is you need to be able to adjust on the run, because a lot of times you can go into the off season with particular goals, but you're in a position where those players aren't available. So, and I think that's often one of the fallacies that people look at an organization. They say, well, why don't you go get that type of player? Well, the reality is he doesn't exist. But if you told me what I would love, I'd love to have a good power pitching. I love power pitching overall, but there's been very successful non-power pitchers too. So ideally, I would love to have that. I'm also in a spot where I think that defense in today's game is extremely important. You'd love to have defense up the middle. Your catcher, second, short, center. Still, defense is important at the other positions, but you also like to mix some power in there, and usually the power comes at the corners. Speed is important in today's game. So I think if you mix all of those, but again, you can start off with that premise, and if for some reason you start off and you get a power hitting second baseman, well, maybe it's not important to have it somewhere else. So, but that would be a general premise. But I do think it's extremely important that with your planning, that you can go in different directions once you start your plans, and you have a pulse of all the players and who's available and who may surprisingly be available, and be able to adjust off of those thought processes. And a lot of it's getting good information. A lot of it's having your scouts out there and being in a spot where they're on top of things, because with you and the people in the front office, you can only talk to so many clubs per day. So having your people out there knowledgeable can be extremely important.
Okay, Ian on the left.
Ian Brown from MLB.com. Dave, how much of you coming here had to do with just your history, your comfort with John Henry, and how much it was just kind of the allure of the Red Sox and who they are as a franchise?
Well, I think first and foremost, and this is no effect, because the Red Sox, they're a great organization. They're one of the best known teams, storied franchises in sports and baseball. But for me, having done this for a long time, I think that your relationship, my relationship with ownership, is as important as anything. And not that John's not going to get mad at me at times, because he has that right to do, and Tom too. But I think that it's a situation where having a comfort zone to work with people that you really enjoy working with, that you're driven to do the same thing, that is where it starts. Because you can also, let's just say this was a storied franchise, which it is, and you didn't have people that you had that same confidence and trust in, well, it may not be as appealing as would it be with John in that position.
Go to Tim, also on the left.
Tim Britton with the Providence Journal. Dave, you're inheriting one of the best farm systems in baseball, which you didn't necessarily have the last couple of years in Detroit.
It's very nice.
What's kind of your philosophy on the value of that farm system and how you may be able to leverage it for major league talent?
Well, I think, and that's a great question. I mean, one of the, when you look at the pluses of the Boston Red Sox at this time, is they have a great farm system. It's very well respected. It's one of the best in the game, if not the best. I don't know how you decipher between 1 and 2 and 3, but it's one of the best. There's also a lot of good young players here that are breaking in at the big league level right now. So it's a great place to start. I think that the farm system, we used the farm system a little bit different when I was in Detroit. We had the pedal to the metal to try to win a world championship, and unfortunately we fell short of that, but every year. And we traded a lot of our good young talent at that time. We just recently replenished it a little bit. But ideally, your farm system, if you can bring up your own homegrown players, all the much better. You know the players, you know their talents, you've taught them, you get to know them inside and out. It also gives you cost stability of young players. But it's also a situation where you're going to still make trades. Some of them you'll have duplicates at positions. So you're in a spot where you will also make trades and use some of those young guys, and I'm sure we'll also be in a spot where we sign free agents. But the reality is, if you have a strong farm system, that's the best place to start, because it gives you the foundation to go in a lot of different directions.
Okay, Jen on the left.
Dave, Jen McCaffrey, MassLive.com. Do you have a timeline for a GM and kind of what qualities you might be looking for in a GM candidate?
I do not have a time frame. I sat this weekend when I thought the possibility existed and start making notes. My family was in Oklahoma visiting my in-laws and their family, and so I was out at home on Saturday and Sunday, and I was watching baseball. I went for a jog, watched baseball games, and made notes, and never left the house other than to do that. And it was a situation where my pages are like a couple legal size pages of things to do. So there's a lot to be done, and basically a lot of it for me to come up to understanding what's going on in the organization as much as possible, as quickly as possible. Part of that will be hiring a general manager, a very important part, but I don't want to rush that right now. So I think it's important to get the right person rather than to rush it. And when you say the type of person, I guess it's I'm really open-minded to a lot of different things. I think it's important that, of course, we would be on the same page, be a good baseball person. But I don't really have a specific that this person has to do that, because I think in a front office, if you're going to have a successful front office, people complement one another. And so I have my strengths and I have my weaknesses, and this person will have their strengths and weaknesses, and hopefully you can build that group together to put together and cover yourself in all areas, and that's what my goal will be.
Okay, Maureen on the right over here.
Maureen Mullen, the Lynn item. Dave, granted that any evaluation you've done of the team up until yesterday was done externally, but what have you identified as the most pressing issues for the team, the organization, on the field, off the field, that have to be addressed?
Well, I can't really tell you that I have identified the pressing issues yet. I'd rather get in here and talk to people. I think for me, that's why starting now gives me such an advantage, because I don't have to make that determination now. I don't have to make, for example, today when I walked around the front office and we're talking to a couple guys there, and they said, well, here's one decision we need to make today. And it's, we have to ask release waivers on Justin Masterson by 2 o'clock. Are you okay with that? By 1 o'clock, are you okay with that? And I said, sure. It was by 2. Fine, go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and follow through. Contact the appropriate person in media relations that lets everybody else know. That was really the only decision we had to make today. Call Justin, call his agent, we're fine. We'll sit down tomorrow and we'll start going through everything else. So I really think it's important to not rush things and not make impulsive decisions, because right now we have time. And this is not a real active trade period time. You have plenty of time to determine people's contracts aren't up at this time of the year. So this is an ideal time to sit back, collect a lot of information, and then make those decisions over the next time frame.
Okay, Alex in the middle.
John and Tom, Alex Spear with the Boston Globe. You mentioned that it was important to sit down in Chicago to determine whether or not there was the degree to which there was philosophical alignment with Dave. How much was that the central thrust of the conversation as compared to perhaps rethinking some of the tenets that you had put front and center in your own operating philosophy, and suggesting that there was a time to adapt some of those operational philosophies?
That was, I think, a central discussion topic, but it was a wide-ranging discussion. There was a lot to discuss. How he viewed, we hadn't, Mike and Tom had never met Dave in this kind of setting before, with these kind of questions. So there was a lot to cover, and but I would say that was a central aspect. One of a few, though.
Go to Butch in the back left.
This is back here, John and Sam. Question for each of you. For most of your ownership here, John, when you've been asked who runs the Boston Red Sox, you've said Larry Lucchino. So I guess that question might be a little more complicated to answer now, or is it? How do you answer that question now? And a follow-up, Sam, how do you view the role, and how much are you looking forward to working with Dave?
Well, today we have Sam up here because this is really our lineup for 2016. So today we're presenting basically our lineup for 2016 and beyond. And but Larry still runs the Red Sox on a day-to-day basis. He's involved in been involved in a couple of other things. So there's been he's been away from the club somewhat recently, but we're I don't know what to say beyond that.
Yeah, Butch, I think I see the role as the primary focus is to support and provide resources so that we can have the best baseball operation on the planet. Number one. Number two, I have learned from the best mentor that anyone could ever have, and that's Larry Lucchino, our president and CEO. He and I, along with John and Tom, have been working on a transition plan for several years, actually. It became public a few weeks ago, and I think everyone, all of the employees of the Red Sox, salute Larry for his incredible leadership. We thank him for that, and we are ready to continue to honor the fundamental obligations and commitments that John and Tom and Larry made back in 2002, which was to field a competitive team, to preserve and protect Fenway Park, to enhance the customer experience here, and to be active participants in the community. Rest assured, that's not going to change with new leadership moving forward. And I'm very excited to collaborate with Dave and all baseball operations, be there for them as a sounding board, as a resource, and make sure that they have everything they need as we look to get the Red Sox back where they belong.
I just to add to that, and coming in here new, I think one thing with organizations that's extremely important is that we work together. And sometimes in baseball, you've seen that there's a division between the baseball and the business operations. I don't know how, I would assume here it's been great because everybody's been involved. We work closely together, and we will do that because people are all in it as one. So I look forward to working with Sam, and I'm sure we'll collaborate on a lot of things together because we will work together. But it's going to be fun. And Sam will run the business and can be in charge of the baseball, but we'll be working closely together on a lot of things.
Can I just say one thing? That today we are thinking about the celebration of Dave joining us, but we're also going to spend the rest of the day thinking about our friends who are suffering cancer, and I see Jerry Remy here, and we're thinking about John Farrell, and it's a great day for the Red Sox to support the Jimmy Fund, and we all have friends who have challenges, and I just want to say that we are remembering that as part of our civic responsibility, it's to raise money today and strike out cancer.
Okay, Joe on the right.
Joe Amorcino, WHDH-TV. A question for John Henry. John, you're known as a numbers guy. I'm just wondering if you can explain your personal philosophy when it comes to analytics versus talent evaluation and how that's swayed through your career as an owner in baseball, specifically in recent years.
Well, I've always been an advocate of data. That's my background, but I think it's been there's been an overemphasis in the media about the level to which we perform analytics, data analytics. We have terrific people in that area, but it's not the overwhelming basis for our philosophy. It's more of a tool. It's a way of, it goes beyond, it often goes beyond being a tool because sometimes it can actually drive us in a certain direction, toward a certain direction, but it hasn't been the driving force in baseball operations under Theo or under Ben, and I doubt if it will under Dave, but we do realize and understand that it's very important in today's world to have a very strong analytics department. So we will continue to strengthen that. We've been talking about that in the last few weeks about how we strengthen that area.
Can you give an example of when it did drive you in a certain direction with data and had success with it?
Tom?
Well, it's a very fast changing world where data is more and more useful, but of course it's how you interpret it. Just to give you an example, we've been aware that pitch framing by the catcher can actually cause either a run differential one way or the other, depending on the particular talent a pitcher has to do that. So that might be a metric that 10 years ago might not have been noticed, but it's certainly something that, again, would be part of Dave's toolbox. That would be an example.
That is a good example.
Okay, in the back right.
Bob Halloran from WCVB. Dave, you said earlier that in Detroit you had the pedal to the metal to win a World Series championship every year. I have to assume that's the case here, and therefore I might interpret that there's a lot of young kids in that great farm system who might be a bit anxious that some trades might happen rapidly.
Well, not necessarily. I wouldn't agree with that because I think that overall here, when we visit about the job, one thing, and we want to win. I mean, that's a goal. You want to win next year. But John and Tom and Mike both said we want to do it in a way in which we sustain that and try to do it in the right fashion where year in and year out you can do that. And I think that if your total focus is just trying to win at a particular time at all cost, you end up trading a lot more players than you normally would. I think right here the foundation to do it the right way is already in place. All you have to do is look in the lineup and watch Bogarts play short and Swihart catch and be in a position where you look at the outfield that's out there, when the three young guys were out there with Betts and and Castillo and Bradley. I mean, when you look at those guys, and you look at Rodriguez pitch, and I joked with John Farrell when I told him last night, I said, well, gee, looks like we'll win a lot of games when we pitch Rodriguez 162. I mean, but I don't mean that as anything about any of the other pitchers, but I mean, he's got a chance to be a #1 type pitcher. And then you look at the young guys coming. So I think the ideal way is you take those group of guys, you continue to grow them, and you supplement them with some of the other guys. I think the foundation to do it is in place. So I don't think anybody needs to be nervous, not that there's not going to be any trades, but I think that really the foundation here is great to get it done, because there's not many people that have those young players like that and the young talent coming. So I think it's more incumbent upon us to make some decisions on veteran players as we add them that will add to that group of young guys and help them win.
If I can follow up, this is one thing that we did discuss, and you really have to give credit to Ben and to baseball operations that they did not trade some of our great prospects just because we were having a bad season this year. We're, as Dave said, we feel that we're very well set up for the future.
Okay, we're going to take 2 final questions and then have these gentlemen available for one-on-ones. So beginning with Rob.
Dave, Rob Bradford, WEEI.com. 2 questions about the same subject. Your philosophy on signing pitchers heading into their 30s, free agent pitchers, and also the importance of having a top-of-the-rotation ace, quote-unquote ace, that the rest of the rotation can get behind.
Well, normally if you're going to have a world championship club, you need to have a #1 type of guy. Normally that's the case. But again, when we talk about flexibility and building the roster, doesn't mean that you might have more middle-of-the-rotation guys if your bullpen is extremely good. So, but ideally you want to have a top-of-the-rotation guy as you go forward. It takes, not only gives you a better chance to win that game, takes some of the pressures off the other pitchers. You're also in a spot where they give you more innings, you can rest your bullpen a little bit more. You go into a short series and you're in the postseason and you got them. But it doesn't always work. I mean, you look at some other clubs and they've had strong bullpens, and they won a couple of years ago. When you looked at that Texas-St. Louis series, neither one of them had starting pitching that was pitching real well. They swung the bats, and their bullpens really were a difference at that time. So that's the first part of it. I mean, we all know the free agency route has its pluses and minuses. We know when guys reach a certain ages, and there are exceptions, that a lot of times you have your production up here and they start to decline. And when you sign those guys, they're in a spot where you're paying for past production. It happens, and it's happened a lot. I think in general, philosophically, we all know that. I think it's what we'll do is when those times come up, we'll sit down and we'll discuss them and see, you know, some guys age better than others, some guys have better deliveries. But there are no certainties when it comes to pitching, when it comes to the long term.
Okay, final question, Johnny.
I'm John Miller, WBZ News Radio 1030. This is for John or Tom. Did you interview any minority candidates? And if not, did you have to get permission from the commissioner?
Well, we weren't engaged no, I did talk to Rob about this issue, the commissioner, and we did not engage in a search. When Dave became available, we sought to find out whether or not there was a fit. So had we engaged in a search at the end of the season, or just been engaged in a search, we certainly would have done so.
And we have assured the commissioner, and Dave is on the diversity committee in Major League Baseball, that we will be interviewing minority candidates when Dave searches for the next general manager.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That will conclude the formal portion of this press conference. Tom, Dave, and Sam will be available for one-on-ones. Thank you.
Okay, you have been listening to the introduction of the new president of baseball operations.